Hi, I'm Mike Burton. I'm a professional comic book illustrator. In this video series, I'm going to be taking you through how I create a page for London Gothic, the book I'm currently working on. This is part 3. It'll be covering the colouring. If you haven't seen part 1 and 2, I'll leave a link to the playlist in the description, so check those out before you watch this one. Okay, so colour flatting. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new folder underneath all the inks and the pencils and stuff. Now I tend to keep the character colours separate from the backgrounds, but that's for something later. First, turn the pencils off and the details. So this just simplifies the image up a bit, makes it easier to pick areas to put the colour flats in. I do use the graphics tablet for this at times, but mostly I try to use the Magic Wand tool as much as possible because that just speeds the process up. So I just select an area, make sure I've got sample all layers on. Incidentally, when you sample all layers, it does seem to be that it doesn't actually select it quite as well as if you actually select the layer itself. So sometimes I'll do it where I actually select the layer and then select it, and then I'll just, if it's someone's jacket or something, it's all going to be the same colour. I just select that all at the same time. Occasionally you'll have gaps and you're just going to have to fill them in. You can't fill all the gaps in, you don't really want to. So I've selected all what I want to be that specific colour there, and then I'll go select, modify and expand it just by 2 or 3 pixels. If you don't do that, when you fill it, you'll end up with sort of a white line where around all the lines. So it's an important step. You'll see that there's little tiny bits that are still going to need touching up, but it saves a lot of time to use it. When you're doing your colour flats, you want to kind of keep them as neutral as possible when it comes to the darkness. You don't want to be doing something like, say for example, if this is a black boot, you don't really want to be making it super dark, because when the way that I do the shadowing, I do the shadowing all on one layer, so it's going to affect everyone the same. So if you've got a very dark colour or a dark shade of brown or grey, it's going to become like pitch black and you're not going to be able to see anything anymore. Another thing that's useful is using your background layer, stick a colour overlay on there and some bright garish colour of some kind, something you're not going to use in the actual image, and that can help you see if, for example, there's a gap there. If the colour that you're using is close to white or white itself, because we want to fill in the white as well, it can just help you pick up on those places where you've missed something and you can't actually see it just at a glance. You can see here where I'd accidentally done some of the details on the same layer as the rest of the lines. So you can see there where, like, I've got to now fill this in, which I wouldn't have done if it had been on a separate layer. As you can see, it's quite a laborious, time-consuming part of the process, and there's nothing really creative about this. Anybody can do this, you know, and if you get someone that's untrained to do it, then you can just quickly change the colours if they're not the right shade or something like that. So if you can, you want to get someone to do this for you. It's a very low paid job doing colour flats, because if you can use Photoshop you can do it basically, but if you can, get someone else to do it for you if you're a colourist, because it's taking up your valuable time and you're the only one that can do the proper colours. So while someone else is working on that, you can be working on the stuff that only you can do for the project. So on this page, that's basically all of the character colour flats done for the most part. I'm then going to do a new layer on the bottom. I'm going to put all the background colours on. I'm probably going to do this one as a separate layer, this cliff and this smoke, and I'll explain why I've done that layer. Okay, so what I've done here is, this is another element of making things look like they're further in the background. Now, all of these green areas are grass, but I've got the grass here that's darker, and then I've gradually made it lighter as it goes further back. That's because it's the light's travelling through more air and becomes more diffuse. I don't know, but you look at any sort of landscape image, things that get further away tend to be more they're more faded. So it helps to give that illusion of it moving backwards and that being further back than this. Incidentally, this scene is actually at night time, but I'm going to make it look like night later. So the way we do that is numerous different ways, but one of which is we desaturate it. So a lot of the colour is not going to be present, but doing it in different colours means that we'll have that colour there, so we can pull a little bit of it through. So for example, when I do the rocks, they'll be grey and have a little less tinge of green to them than these will, even after we desaturate it. So I find it easier just to do the things as the colours that they actually are, and then do the actual effect of it being night afterwards. Thinking about it, I'm actually made a decision that I'm going to separate out the layers for the grass and for the rocks on this one, because I am going to be using some textures, and it'll just save me a little bit of time later. I won't have to colour select, I can just select a layer, but I'll go into more detail about that when we get to the texturing phase. So this is an important point. So it looks like as I was selecting this area, I forgot to expand it, and you can see that due to the tolerance, we've got this edge around that particular section. So always make sure to expand your selection. Now this one, for example, if I was to select inside of here, to be fair, it's not done too bad of a job, but you've got these little edges that might cause a bit of an issue. So what I'm going to do for that one is I'm going to turn off sample all layers. I'm going to select what I've already done on both the beach and the sea, and then I'm also going to select that on the grass. Well, that one's not great in and of itself, and that of the rocks. And then I'm just going to select inverse, and then select modify expand by 2. And hopefully that should make that a little bit easier to fill in the foam. That's not bad. I'm actually going to group these because this establishing shot's going to be quite a lot done to it. I'm just going to put these in a group as panel 1. The only issue with having lots of layers is larger file sizes, so as long as you've got a massive hard drive, keep as many layers as you can. It's never going to hurt. You can always collapse them down if you need to later. Okay, so that's the colour flats done. I've purposely left the sky blank. You'll see why I've done that when we go into the texturing and colouring phase. Okay, so we're on to the colouring phase properly now. Now, what I like to do for London Gothic is quite a gritty comic book, so I like to use the pencils layer and keep that in. If you look when I turn on the pencil layer, it just gives it a little bit more texture and a little bit extra depth to the image, as opposed to just the pencils and inks. Makes it look a little bit grittier. So we're going to get rid of these guidelines. So I'm going to go inside the pencils layer and then going to create a new layer, and I'm going to select color range. In fact, I'm going to zoom in first. Go select color range, and then this is already set up, but what I would do is you select the blue, use the plus eyedropper, and then just keep selecting around it so you can get all of the shades of that blue/green, and then I just put the fuzziness up so that I'm sort of getting everything, but not so much that you start to see some of the black here coming in, but that's alright around, that's fine. And then it's just to select, modify, expand, 3 pixels should be fine. And then I'm just going to fill that selection with white, and then it's gone. Obviously you can see some of the gaps there. You shouldn't really be able to see that on the actual image. So if we save that and close it, you pick it up a little bit, but once the textures are in, you'll not be able to tell that that's there. And for any panels that are sort of closer in, the lines wouldn't be there anyway. So the next part that I'm going to do is the texturing. What I tend to do with London Gothic is I use a website called SketchUp Textures. And basically that's a royalty-free website. If you want the high definition textures, you have to pay a very small subscription fee. And it's mainly for use in 3D modeling, the textures, but I use those just to add texture to different elements. So like if it's cotton, I'll drop a texture in behind there. Now for skies and things, this is nighttime, so I use images of stars. It's not, I don't think it's normally done, but that's one of the unique things about the artwork for London Gothic, because we want to make it as realistic as possible. So I use a lot of real world textures in order to improve that. So I'm going to start off with the very, very back. I've got a huge selection of textures that I've downloaded, ones for reuse. Again, if you ever do this yourself, you need to make sure that any that you use, you've either paid for or have the rights to, or they're completely royalty free and can be used in a commercial product, because otherwise, you could get in trouble later on down the line. Okay, so next I'm going to put the proper borders in. So for London Gothic we use blank borders. So I'm just going to select the borders, use a fill to do the black, and then cut out what I need to. So I'm going to start with the character textures now. Now sometimes what I will do, depending on how close the character is to the viewer, I'll actually warp the texture. It's not always necessary, but it can be nice to get a little bit of motion into, like for example, the cotton. Otherwise it can look ever so slightly just plastered on. And I'm just cutting out like sort of the basic shapes. Certain textures are going to be larger than others because the character is close to the screen, but I keep them all in one folder, and then I do the final layer mask at the end. So I'm just making sure that, like, for example, these guys are going to have the same texture applied to them in the same folder, but I don't want them to, have the texture so large as it is on this character here, because it wouldn't make any sense. So that's all the cotton I need. So I'm going to now turn this layer off, select this layer, and the magic wand tool without the sample or layers on, and then I can just easily select. Okay, so the brown is clothing, that all wants the cotton effect on it. I can select the soldiers. So now that's all selected, I just make a layer mask on the cotton folder, and then I can switch this to colour burn. Generally I use colour burn for cotton, don't know why, it looks the best, but it doesn't show up well on the lighter cotton, so I just duplicate it and switch it to multiply, and then it shows up on the white as well. Okay, so that's probably all of the texturing that I'm going to do. Certainly seems like all of it. Yeah, for now I think that's fine for the texturing. I'm not sure about this rock texture. I think it's interfering a bit with the lines, but we'll see what that looks like once we start shading. I might have to make some slight adjustments here and there to levels and colours. So next I'm going to start on the shading. So the way that I do the shading, another folder, I separate it out into character shading and to the background shading. So there's lots of different ways of doing the shading. Different people have their own ways. The way I do it, I create a new layer, stick it on multiply, have it on 60%. I'll do 2 layers, 2 at 60, one for the first pass of shading, and then one for a darker shade. And I just use a regular brush for this, so just a regular general brush. For the character shading, I have the hardness at 40%, give it a bit more of an edge on it. And yeah, all you need to do with this really is just keep in mind where your light source is coming from, and if you've drawn yourself into a bit of a corner with the lighting somewhat, so say for example if my light's coming from here and it's going to cast a big shadow over his face there and I don't want him to be in shadow, just adjust it a little bit. There's plenty of ways light could bounce around there, and most people's eyes not even going to pick up on, as long as it looks about right, that's what's most important. So again, don't be tied to the realism too much, because if it makes the artwork look worse, then it's wrong. It doesn't matter whether it's right, if it looks worse, then it's wrong. So so I'm gonna get cracking on the shading. Now what I tend to do is, so for the character shading, and I'll be doing the character highlights as well later, seeing as we've got all these layers separate, we've already sorted that out, we might as well use them. So these are the character layers. I've also included this one because I want this layer to be it's effectively a character. The character is usually in the foreground, so that's why I tend to separate them out. So we're just going to control click to select it, control click, control click. Now I could use that as the layer, but I prefer to incorporate the inks as well, and because we've got the inks on separate layers as well from the background. Now you will get this occasionally, because sometimes I forget which ones I've actually put on which layers. But once you've selected them all, obviously that means you've gone right up to the edge, so that's really nice for the highlights. But obviously this tree and this tree I've done as part of the character shading, but that's easily sorted. We can just go to the panel that they're on, Magic Wand tool, and we'll just colour pick those. So have we got the lines on those as well? We have. So I just want a block selected here of what. Yeah, we've got that one as well. So we'll take that. Now, have we got this? I think we've got that as well. So we'll take that as well. This will be more important later with the highlights, but I like to just get this selected and out of the way because then I don't have to worry about it again. So that's all that selected now. And you can see it's right up to the line. Yep, so that's fine. So now, our character shading, I'm just going to drop that layer mask in. And now, as we're doing the shading, we can go right up to the edge and we're not going to go over. So it just makes this part of the process so much easier when you can just, you don't have to worry. I mean, you've already done the work to separate these things out, so you may as well use it. Okay, so now I'm going to start work on the background shading. I've still got another layer of the character / foreground shading to do, but I'm going to start on the background shading, get them both in before I start putting the darkest shade in. Exactly the same as before. Create another folder. Again, I want to separate out the layers, so like I don't want the shading to go over the background, like the sky box basically. So I'm going to do the same thing I did before. I'm going to select the colours, and then as the inks are on a separate layer I can do that as well. So I'll do another layer mask on that. Same again, multiply 60%. Generally I tend to do these 0% hardness. Depends what it is, where it is, but generally I tend to make it a bit softer on the background because most of the time it's going to be in the distance. Now sometimes I'll do just a single layer on the background for the shading, but we'll see as it goes along. The nice thing about doing it this way is because you've kept all the values pretty much the same. The shading is all one layer and you can do all of the background shading all at once. So it's quite a lot of time, it takes quite a lot of effort early on. As you can see now, it's like really quick to drop in these shadows. So there, for example, I didn't envisage there being a tree over here casting a shadow over here, but you know, there could be. And if I shade this part in, when I bring the highlights onto him later, it's going to make him stand out a bit more. So that's another thing to think about with these shadows. If it's shadow, then it'll push it back a bit, and you want to try and get the contrast to be nice so that people can read the image properly. Here I feel like this part is pulling focus, so I'm just going to fill it in. Don't know why there's a shadow there, but that way focuses the the viewer's eye into this section, more sort of like a vignette. Now we've got a secondary light source on this one. So obviously the moon's lighting this up, but this gun flare, we want to respect that in the shading as well. Okay, so now I've got the first few layers of shadowing. I'm going to start on the highlights. So I'm going to start with the character highlights first. I'm just going to control click the character shading layer mask, because that's got exactly what we need. And then I'm just going to go right to the top, so above everything, above the pencils. I'm going to create an effects folder. And character highlights. Apply that layer mask. And then first off I'm going to go soft light. And it's moonlight, so I'll go with a nice light blue. 0 hardness. And then this is where the image should just really start to pop. So after the soft light and then the linear light, it's going to make the character sort of stand off more from the page, so there's less blending in. Might want some more blue in it. So I'm going to take off the effect. Do a colour overlay. Just make it a bit more blue. I'm going to rasterize that effect. Make sure I've colour picked it first. I'm going to rasterize the layer style and then stick it back onto soft light. Yeah, that's better. Now, for this one, I'm going to create a new one. New layer. Soft light. I'm going to do an orange or a yellow for that gun flare. You can already start to see, like, straight away, once this is on, you start to see that lighting from the flare, and it's making it look a lot more realistic. Now, strictly speaking, you probably wouldn't see it this far away, the light. I mean, maybe, but I'm going to put a little bit on him as well. That'll help make it stand out from the background. It'll just make it look a bit cooler. Yeah, I could have done those both on the same layer, but I like to have full control, because I might end up toning that blue down. We'll have to see what it looks like later. It's a bit extreme, and it's going to need toning down. But keeping all the layers available and editable, like I say, massive file size, but just gives you that fine control towards the end where you can really balance everything out properly. Because the other thing as well is, it depends on what you're working on. There seems to be a holdover in like superhero comics, things like that, from back in the day when printing wasn't very good and there wasn't much nuance to the colours of the prints. So the print was generally muddy and you wanted these sort of very much block colours. Like, for example, you wouldn't want this here. Now, we're going to change it and it's going to be different, but you wouldn't want like this blue against this blue. You want that one that. Because they'd have been exactly the same, because that's the variation that you add in the print. And that seems to sort of have stuck, so it's more sort of cartoony colouring that you tend to see. There are some exceptions, but we're sort of going for a very filmic look. And now, even there, you can see what's happening. But once we do the linear light layer, that's really going to make this stand out, because you've got not only colour to contrast your characters with, you've got contrast to contrast your characters with, which is not an option that they had back in the day. It was just colour. I mean, you could use contrast. You could use white and black, but that was, you had white, black, and then you had block colours. That was what you had to make your image legible. But we've got loads more tools available to us now. The downside to that, of course, is if you're nuanced in your colours, you're going to have to liaise with the printer closely to get, and you're going to have to do test prints to get the look that you're going for, because if they don't print it the way you expect them to print it, and sometimes even if they do, you're walking a fine line, and you don't want to spend all this time in your artwork to not be able to see elements of it. See, it's starting to come together a little bit now. Now, let's drop in our linear light. Might be linear light. I play around with the layer settings. Sometimes linear dodge, linear light. Linear light might work. I use the same colour generally. And this is our highlight. Now, we're not going to strictly go for where the highlights will definitely be. We just want that edge, because it's a complicated image, complicated page. We really want to make the characters separate out, but in a way that makes sense. Well, this will probably be too bright for certain things, like it might be fine on skin, but we can always go over with a rubber, a lower opacity rubber, and take the edge off some of this in strategic places. It's also important to note that it's actually it's raining in this scene. I'll be going, when I do the more of the effects, I'll be adding in the rain. So when things are wet, obviously they reflect more light. So I think linear light's probably the way to go. We're just going to take the edge off it a little bit in certain places. Keep that main edge, separate the character out, and then the ones that are on the inside, we're going to drop them down a little bit. We're also going to do a pass over the whole thing to tie the colours in a little bit more to each other. So I'm going to be doing quite a lot more. We're going to be putting some gradients in as well, but you can already see how this is sort of starting to make the characters stand out a lot more from the background. So I think next I'll do the highlights for the background. I'm actually going to put in the moon, I think, and the clouds before that. I'm also going to select the characters. So this is what I normally do for the pencil marks. I select the characters, and I just use a layer mask on that as well, so we get that sort of gritty detail on the characters. I might actually, in this one, include the background as well, because I've done quite detailed pencils on the background. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the background as well, so the only thing that it's not going to appear on is outside the lines and then over on the sky, because we don't want it there. So now, if you were to look near the moon, around the moon, you aren't going to see stars around here because this light's too bright. Now, normally, obviously, a camera lens will be consistent across the image. So if you can't see it around here, you wouldn't see any of the stars in the sky. It's like on the moon landings, the reason why you can't see the stars in the sky is because the moon's too bright, so the aperture closes. But to make it sort of look more light sense, but like so that we can still see stuff elsewhere, just around there. I'm going to make it so that we can't see the stars around the moon, which should make it look a little bit more realistic. I'm going to put in one of the gradient effects on the top so we can see how this is starting to blend together. Okay, I think before I start balancing the linear lights on the character, I want to get an idea of how it's going to look sort of closer to the finish. So I'm going to do the soft light on the background, get the gradients in, and then I'm going to do the shadowing on the background of the characters. One of the benefits, I think, of doing all parts of the artwork yourself is that you aren't as reverent for the artwork itself. Like, we've had some people say, like, oh, I can't see as much of the line work or some of the line work in London Gothic, and that's a conscious choice, because the artwork's not about making me look good or trying to make it look so you go, oh, look at that ink line or something like that. Whereas if you're inking someone else's work, or for example, if you're the colorist, you don't want to hide the other person's work. Whereas for me, I don't care if I hide some of my work if it makes it look more realistic or if it makes it look more atmospheric. I really don't care. Whatever looks better is what I'll do. If that means blocking something out, making it so you can't see it, then that's what I'll do. Because at the end of the day, that's, I'm not hiding anyone else's work. It's only my own. So I think that can be helpful in that respect. And also, it depends on what sort of style you're going for, really. But again, like I said, we want to make it look like it's film-like or TV-like. We don't want you to be looking at it going, this is a good piece of art. We kind of want you to look at it and go, oh, that scene is interesting, or that seems atmospheric, that place, or, So we're aiming for as much realism as we can realistically get, with the time frame, and And another thing on that note is, you want to stand out. You want to look different. I mean, you think of some of the most iconic artists that you can think of, people like Alex Ross. He does something different to everybody else. His style is his own style, and that stands out. Same with Todd McFarlane, or Neil Adams. They started doing things that people weren't doing necessarily, or it wasn't very often that people were doing, and that became, their style and made them stand out. So, it's important to know the rules, but it's also important to try new things out and just see what you can create. Some people won't get it, some people won't like it, but that's not what you want to be aiming for. You want to aim for something that some people love, and that's it. It doesn't matter if some people dislike it. As long as you've got some people that really like it, then you've succeeded. They're the ones that are going to be buying your book. So I'm just doing some raindrops now, bouncing off the characters. This goes a long way to sell the fact that it's actually raining. And I just tend to do it basically anywhere where there's a surface, flat surface, where rain would kind of bounce. But also, I don't actually do it like very strict, because if you've ever seen rain bounce off someone when it's heavy rain, it seems to go pretty much everywhere. So You don't need to be too strict with it. And a lot of this is just playing around with it, you know. It's an experiment. If something doesn't look quite right, have a play with it, and don't be wedded to anything. Okay, next I'm going to put the blurs in. So I start this off by flattening the entire image, excluding the... We usually exclude the borders, but we've done some crazy stuff with the borders, so I'm just going to include them. It shouldn't be an issue. So I just duplicate everything. Merge those. So now I've got a full duplicate. Duplicate that again and turn it off just to keep it safe in case we need it for later. So filter, blur. Sometimes use motion blur, sometimes path blur. I think we're going to use a path blur for this one. Let's see what a rear sync flash looks like. Again, I'll just layer mask it. Take it out. And then just paint it back in where I want it. So I'm going to do a little bit of linear light work on the background since it's raining. I don't want to overdo this because I don't want to pull too much focus. Okay, so the final thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add a layer of noise. This is one of the things that we do to sort of get like a film-like look. If you want to do the same thing, you just need to get like sort of a grey layer, filter, noise, add noise, and then play around with the settings on here. Get a look that you want. Switch it to overlay over the top of your image. This is that's a bit extreme for what I want, but that's the way it's done anyway. I've got one set up for the rest of London Gothic, so I'll just use that one. Drop that in there. So it ties the image together somewhat and gives it that film-like look. If you can see, you might not be able to see that on YouTube, but if I zoom in, just gives it a little bit more texture. Now, London Gothic's we do a digital release and a print release. So I'll save out an RGB version first. I've designed it in RGB, by the way. So I'll just save first. Luckily, I've somehow managed to retain this as a PSD. Oftentimes they end up having to be PSBs because they get too large to be PSDs. So I'm just going to save this out as a TIFF. I use LZW image compression. I've not seen a difference, and it keeps file sizes much smaller. Discard layers and save copy. Now I'm going to check. I want to go View Proof Colors to have a look at the CMYK version. Just tend to bump up the brightness ever so slightly. Obviously, it depends on your printer. You're going to have to do test prints to get an idea of how it's going to come out. I've got these layers set up from doing test prints, and then see how it is. If you change printers, you'll have to do another test print. If you're doing something like this, which is, a lot of the colours are quite close to each other. They're not very it's not very cartoony, so a lot of the colours will blend together, so you need to do test prints just to make sure that everything's going to come out and it's going to be clear enough, because I'm straddling the line here with this. But that looks good to me, so I'm going to go Image Mode CMYK, and then I'm going to merge it. and then I'm going to save it out again as a TIFF. And that's it for the artwork. So the next stage is the lettering. There isn't a lot of speech bubbles on this page, but I'll take you through the process, and then I might just add in a few extras just to explain a few things about, you know, the lettering process, just to give you an example. So thanks for watching. I hope you found that useful, and if there's anything that you want me to clarify, or if you have any questions, then please leave them down in the comments. So make sure to subscribe here. There's also some other things on our channel. We've got a podcast, Two Evil Scoundrels, where we talk about all elements of creating your own comic book, going to Comic Cons, things like that, even character design. So you can check them out on our channel now. If you want to pick up London Gothic, which is the page that I've been working on for London Gothic Chapter 3, Chapter 1 and Chapter 2 are available on our website right now. And we do full international delivery, so you can get it no matter where you are. So I'll see you next time.